The void screamed silence around the obsidian vessel as it had for 732 years, 4 months, and 16 days. The ship's sensors registered each passing moment with mechanical precision, waiting for something its ancient programming could barely comprehend. Worthiness. Captain Valorum Caney pressed his palm against the viewport of the research vessel Meridian's Edge, watching the impossible craft drift in the shadow of the dead moon Gex 7. Unlike every other derelict they'd encountered in this graveyard system, this one showed no signs of decay. No cosmic radiation scarring, no micrometeorite impacts, no ice crystal formations. It simply existed as pristine as the day it had first appeared in the historical records. "Still nothing on the scans, Captain," reported Navigation Officer Lyessa. Vorth, her cybernetic implants flickering with frustrated data streams. "It's like the ship is actively rejecting our sensors. Every probe we send gets redirected." Redirected. Caney turned from the viewport, his weathered face carved with curiosity rather than concern. At 43, he'd seen enough impossible, things in the outer spiral, to know that the universe rarely followed human expectations. Not destroyed, not absorbed, redirected, as if the ship is politely declining our invitation to be examined. Vorth's voice carried the bewildered tone of someone whose instruments had never failed her before. Chief Engineer Rothan Vex looked up from his console, his 6-armed Nexari physiology allowing him to work multiple systems simultaneously. "The energy readings are consistent with pre-convergence technology, but there are harmonics I've never encountered. It's almost like the ship is listening." The bridge fell silent, except for the ambient hum of life support. In the 3 weeks since they'd discovered the vessel, every attempt at contact had been met with the same response. Nothing. No communications, no defensive actions, no acknowledgement of their presence. The ship simply waited. Caney had studied every historical record, every myth and legend surrounding black ships in this sector. The stories were consistent across dozens of species and thousands of years, vessels that appeared during moments of great crisis, fought alongside the desperate, and outnumbered, then vanished without explanation. Always crewed by beings no one could identify, speaking no known language, leaving no trace except victory in their wake. "Captain," whispered Ensign Brex Valentine, the youngest member of their crew, "what if it's waiting for something specific?" "What? Do you mean, Ensign?" The young man's fingers danced nervously over his console. "Every legend mentions the same thing. The black ships only appeared when someone was truly worthy of their power. What if this one is still waiting?" Dr. Kalen Morris, their xenoarchaeologist, straightened from his research station. "The worthiness trials of the ancient Vorthak Empire. They believed that ultimate power could only be wielded by those who had proven themselves through sacrifice, wisdom, and an understanding of the greater good." Caney felt something shift in his chest, a recognition he couldn't name. "And if someone proved worthy?" "The legends say the ship would awaken and bond with that individual, becoming an extension of their will and purpose." As if responding to their conversation, the black ship's hull began to emit a faint, pulsing glow. Not the harsh illumination of human technology, but something deeper, more organic. The bridge instruments registered the change, but couldn't categorize. "It, sir." Vorth's voice was barely above a whisper. "It's moving." The obsidian vessel turned with impossible grace, its bow orienting directly toward the Meridian's edge. For the first time in over 7 centuries, the black ship acknowledged the presence of another. In the depths of his being, Valorum Caney felt an ancient call beginning to resonate, though he didn't yet understand what it would demand of him. The black ship held position exactly 1,000 meters from the Meridian's edge, close enough that its alien geometries filled their view screen with impossible angles and surfaces. That seemed to bend light itself. For 18 hours, both vessels remained locked in this cosmic standoff, neither advancing nor retreating. Caney had barely slept, spending the night reviewing personnel files and ship manifests with growing unease. Something was coming. He could feel it in the way reality seemed to thicken around them, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The crisis began with a routine sensor sweep of the system's outer planets. "Captain, we're detecting massive gravitational anomalies near Gex Prime," reported Vorth, her implants blazing with urgent data. "Something's emerging from hyperspace. Multiple contacts, heavily armed." The tactical display materialized above the bridge, showing 12 crimson signatures dropping into real space with predatory precision. Kaney's blood chilled as he recognized the configuration. "Ravager fleet," he whispered. "Vex, how long before they reach the inhabited station on Gex 4? The Nexari's multiple limbs flew across his controls. "At their current velocity, 7 hours and 36 minutes. Gex 4 station housed 40,000 civilian researchers and their families, dedicated to studying the unique quantum properties of the system's dying star. They had minimal defenses and no military escort. The Ravagers would show no mercy. Their reputation for enslaving or destroying entire populations was known throughout the sector. Signal the station, tell them to begin immediate evacuation," Kaney ordered, though he knew it was futile. The civilian transport ships couldn't possibly evacuate everyone in time, and the Ravager fleet would intercept any rescue vessels long before they reached safe hyperspace distance. "Sir," Ensign Valentine's voice cracked with strain, "our weapons. Systems are upgraded, but we're one ship against 12. Even if we engaged, we couldn't—" "I know, Ensign." Kaney's jaw tightened as he calculated probabilities, all of them ending in catastrophe. The Meridian's Edge was a research vessel, not a warship. They could delay the Ravagers for perhaps 30 minutes before being destroyed, buying the station's population nothing but a slightly longer death. As if sensing his thoughts, the black ship's glow intensified. The alien vessel began transmitting on a frequency that bypassed their communications array entirely, speaking directly into the minds of everyone on the bridge. "The test begins. Will you sacrifice everything for those you have never met?" The voice wasn't heard so much as felt, resonating through their consciousness like a memory of ancient starlight. Kaney realized with crystalline clarity that this was the moment the ship had been waiting for, not just for 7 centuries, but perhaps for millennia. "Dr. Morris," he called to the xenoarchaeologist, "the worthiness trials you mentioned. What did they entail?" Morris consulted his data pad with trembling fingers. "The first trial was always sacrifice. The candidate had to prove they would give up everything, their life, their ship, their crew, to protect the innocent. Choose now," the voice whispered. "Command your vessel against the enemy, knowing you will die. Die knowing your sacrifice means nothing, changes nothing, saves no one. Do this because it is right, not because it will succeed." Kaney closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 40,000 lives pressing against his conscience. His crew looked to him with expressions of fear and dawning understanding. They knew what he would choose because they knew who he was. "All hands, this is the captain," he announced over the ship's intercom. "We are engaging a superior enemy force to buy time for the evacuation of Gex 4 station. We will not survive this engagement. Anyone who wishes to take the escape pods has my authorization to do so immediately." He waited. The bridge remained fully staffed. "Vorth, plot an intercept course. Vex, transfer all available power to weapons and shields. Valentine, signal the station. Tell them we're buying them time." As the Meridian's Edge turned toward the approaching Ravager fleet, the black ship's voice filled their minds once more. "You choose to die for strangers. Why?" Kaney spoke aloud, knowing somehow that the ship was listening. "Because if we don't stand for those who can't defend themselves, then what's the point of having the power to stand at all?" The obsidian vessel pulsed once, brilliant as a newborn star. In that light, Kaney felt something fundamental shift in the fabric of space around them. The first trial was complete. The moment the Meridian's edge accelerated toward the Ravager fleet, space itself seemed to fracture around them. The black ship moved with impossible speed, positioning itself directly between Kaney's vessel and the approaching enemy. What happened next defied every law of physics in their databases. The Ravager fleet simply stopped. 12 massive warships, each capable of cracking planets, hung motionless in space as if trapped in crystallized time. But Kaney and his crew could still move, still think, still act within this bubble of suspended reality. The second test begins. The voice resonated through their consciousness. You have proven your willingness to sacrifice. Now prove your wisdom. End this conflict without violence, knowing that your enemies deserve no mercy. Dr. Morris looked up from his frantically scrolling research files. Captain, the ancient texts describe this. The trial of wisdom required the candidate to find a solution that served the greater good while respecting the fundamental nature of all sentient beings, even their enemies. Respect? Vorth's cybernetic implants flickered with indignation. Sir, the Ravagers have destroyed 17 colonies in the past 5 years. They take slaves, they torture civilians for entertainment. They're monsters. Kaney studied the frozen fleet through the viewport, each ship bristling with weapons designed for one purpose, the subjugation and destruction of other sentient life. Everything rational in his mind screamed for their annihilation. The galaxy would be safer, cleaner, better without them. Yes, the voice whispered. They are monsters. They have chosen evil repeatedly, willingly, joyfully. The wise decision would be to destroy them now while they cannot fight back, save the future victims, clean the galaxy of their corruption. But something deeper in Kaney's consciousness rebelled against the simplicity of that solution. He thought of his years exploring the outer spiral, the countless species he'd encountered, the complex web of causation that connected every action to infinite consequences. Vex, can you analyze the Ravager ship's internal structures? Life support, crew quarters, that sort of thing? The Nexari's 6 arms worked with mechanical precision. Scanning now, Captain. Interesting. Life sign distribution suggests a highly stratified social structure. Approximately 3% of each crew registers as the dominant caste, with the remainder showing signs of neural modification. Slavery. Dr. Morris breathed. The Ravagers themselves are largely enslaved. The true masters are just a handful of individuals per ship. Ensign Valentine leaned forward in his chair. Sir, if we could free the enslaved crews, they'd turn on their masters immediately, Kaney finished. But how do we break neural conditioning? From out here? The black ship pulsed, and suddenly detailed schematics appeared on their displays. Not of weapons or shields, but of the neurological control systems binding the Ravager crews to their masters. The alien technology was offering them knowledge, but not solutions. The wisdom had to come from them. Captain, Vorth said slowly, if we could modulate our communications array to the right frequency, we might be able to disrupt the control. Implants. But we'd need to modify our entire sensor grid, and it would take hours of calculations to avoid accidentally lobotomizing everyone aboard those ships. Or, interrupted Dr. Morris, consulting his xenoarchaeological databases, we could use the harmonic frequencies mentioned in the ancient Vorthak texts. They believed that certain sound patterns could unlock the natural resistance of enslaved minds. Kaney felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. 40,000 innocent lives hung in the balance, and he was contemplating a strategy that might not work, that might take too long, that might fail catastrophically. The simple solution beckoned. Let the black ship destroy the Ravagers while they couldn't fight back. Wisdom often requires the harder path, he told himself, even when the easier path seems more just. Do it, he ordered. Modify the communications array. Upload Dr. Morris's harmonic frequencies. We're going to try to free their minds, not destroy their bodies." As his crew worked with desperate efficiency, the voice spoke again. "You choose to save your enemies. Why? Because wisdom isn't about knowing who deserves to live," Caney replied to the empty air. "It's about understanding that if we become the arbiters of who deserves to exist, we become the very thing we're fighting against." The modifications took 47 minutes. When Vorth finally activated the new communications array, broadcasting the liberation frequencies across all channels, the effect was immediate and profound. Throughout the Ravager fleet, neural shackles snapped like chains made of glass. Enslaved crews turned on their masters with centuries of accumulated rage. Within minutes, 12 ships had become battlegrounds of liberation. The black ship pulsed twice, brilliant and approving. The second trial was complete. Space began to flow normally again as the final test approached. With time resuming its natural flow, the Ravager fleet transformed into chaos. Ship after ship reported the same pattern: liberated slaves overwhelming their former masters, seizing control of weapons and navigation systems, turning instruments of oppression into tools of freedom. But freedom, Caney realized, was not the same as peace. "Captain, we're receiving multiple distress signals," reported Vorth, her cybernetic implants processing dozens of overlapping transmissions. "The freed crews are requesting assistance, guidance, coordinates for safe harbor. Some are asking for permission to execute their former masters." The weight of unintended consequences settled on Caney's shoulders. Liberation without direction often led to chaos, and chaos in a fleet of heavily armed warships posed its own dangers to innocent systems. The final test, the voice resonated through the bridge. "You have shown sacrifice and wisdom. Now prove your understanding of the deeper currents that connect all life. What will you do with the freedom you have given?" Dr. Morris looked up from his research station, his face pale with realization. "Captain, the historical records mention this phase. The trial of understanding required the candidate to demonstrate comprehension of the fundamental interconnectedness of all sentient existence. It's not enough to free the oppressed, you must help them find their place in the greater tapestry of civilization." Ensign Valentine monitored the communications array with growing concern. "Sir, some of the liberated ships are already arguing among themselves. Different species, different languages, different ideas of what freedom means. There's talk of splitting up, of seeking revenge against Ravager-allied worlds, of forming new raiding fleets." Caney studied the tactical display, watching 12 ships drift in uncertain formation. Thousands of beings who had been enslaved for decades or centuries, suddenly free but with no shared vision of what that freedom meant. Without guidance, they would fragment into smaller groups. Some might become pirates themselves, others might seek isolation, still others might attempt hopeless revenge missions against superior forces. "Vex, what's the status of their ships? Systems?" The Nexari's multiple arms danced across his controls. "Functional but in need of significant maintenance. Most have been running on minimal upkeep for years. They'll need supplies, repairs, safe harbors for extended refitting. And their crews? Diverse beyond cataloging. I'm reading life signs from at least 47 different species across the fleet. Some are natural enemies, others have incompatible environmental requirements. The likelihood of them maintaining cohesion without external structure approaches zero." The challenge crystallized in Caney's mind. It wasn't enough to break chains. He had to help these liberated beings forge new connections, new purposes, new ways of existing in a galaxy that had forgotten they were more than weapons. "Understanding requires seeing beyond the immediate consequences of your actions," the voice whispered. "Show us that you comprehend the web that connects all choices across all time." Caney activated ship-wide communications, broadcasting on all frequencies the liberated fleet could receive. "This is Captain Valorum Caney of the research vessel Meridians. Edge, I understand you have questions about what comes next. The response was immediate. Dozens of voices in languages both familiar and alien, expressing confusion, anger, hope, and desperate need for direction. I propose an alliance, Caney continued. Not a temporary agreement, but a permanent confederation dedicated to protecting others who cannot protect themselves. You know better than anyone what it means to be powerless, to be at the mercy of those who see you as tools rather than beings. Use that knowledge. Become the force that stands between predators and prey. But, Captain, Valentine whispered, we don't have the authority to negotiate interstellar alliances. This is way beyond our mission parameters, Caney smiled grimly. Ensign, I suspect we passed mission parameters the moment we decided to engage 12 warships with a research vessel. He continued his broadcast. I'm transmitting coordinates for neutral space stations where you can resupply and refit. I'm also providing contact information for the Galactic Mediation Council. They can help you establish legal status as a legitimate defense coalition. But most importantly, I'm offering you partnership with the Terran Exploration Fleet. We have resources, knowledge, and connections throughout the spiral. In exchange, you provide protection for our research missions and assistance with humanitarians crises. Dr. Morris raised an eyebrow. Captain, you're essentially founding a new military alliance without consulting Earth Command. Dr. Morris, sometimes understanding means knowing when the old rules no longer apply to new realities. The responses from the liberated fleet were surprisingly positive. Species that had been enemies found common ground in their shared experience of enslavement. The promise of purpose beyond survival or revenge resonated through ship after ship. You offer them meaning beyond freedom, the voice observed. You understand that liberation without purpose becomes its own form of prison. Why? Because I've seen what happens to people, to entire civilizations, when they have power without purpose. Caney replied. They become the very thing they once fought against, but give them a mission that serves something greater than themselves. The black ship's glow intensified until it outshone the system's dying star. In that brilliance, Caney felt the final pieces of some cosmic puzzle clicking into place. The third trial was complete, but something far greater was just beginning. As the last words of Caney's proposal echoed across the communications channels, something fundamental shifted in the fabric of space around them. The black ship began to sing, not with sound, but with harmonics that resonated through the quantum foam itself, a music older than galaxies. The liberated Ravager fleet responded with unanimous acceptance. 12 voices, speaking for thousands, of freed beings, pledged themselves to the newly formed Aegis Coalition. The irony wasn't lost on Caney. Ships that had once brought terror across the spiral would now stand as guardians against the very evil they had once served. All 3 trials are complete, the voice announced, though now it seemed to come from within Caney's own consciousness, rather than from external space. Sacrifice proved your worthiness to lead. Wisdom proved your fitness to choose. Understanding proved your readiness to accept what comes next. The black ship moved with liquid grace, closing the distance to the meridian's edge until its hull was mere meters away. This close, Caney could see that the vessel's surface wasn't truly solid. It rippled like dark water, alive with patterns that suggested infinite depth. Captain, Vorth's voice was barely a whisper. I'm reading massive energy buildups throughout their ship, but the patterns, they're not weapons signatures. It's almost like it's preparing to integrate with our systems, Dr. Morris finished, his xenoarchaeological expertise finally finding familiar ground. The ancient texts describe this moment. The black ships weren't just vessels, they were symbionts, living technology that bonded with worthy commanders to become something greater than the sum of their parts. Ensign Valentine looked up from his console with wide eyes. Sir, The station on Gex 4 is reporting something impossible. The Ravager attack somehow accelerated their research into quantum consciousness transfer. They're saying they're on the verge of a breakthrough that could revolutionize interstellar communication. The crisis we helped resolve led directly to a discovery that will benefit the entire galaxy. Do you begin to understand? The voice asked. Every choice creates ripples across time. The ship has waited centuries not just for someone worthy, but for the precise moment when that worthiness would create the greatest positive resonance throughout the web of existence. The black ship's hull made contact with the Meridian's edge, and the sensation was unlike anything in Kaney's experience. Not a collision, but a melding, as if both vessels were becoming part of something larger and more complex. He felt the alien ship's consciousness touching his own, ancient and patient, and filled with purposes he could barely comprehend. Memories that weren't his own flooded through his awareness. Countless worlds saved by previous commanders of black ships, civilizations preserved, technologies shared, the slow but steady advancement of consciousness throughout the galaxy. Each bond between ship and commander had lasted exactly as long as needed to accomplish some crucial task before the ship moved on to wait for the next worthy soul. "Captain," Vex reported, his Nexari physiology allowing him to process the impossible. "Sensor readings, our ships are merging at the molecular level. The black ship is integrating with our hull, our systems, our life support, but instead of replacing our technology, it's enhancing it exponentially." The bridge itself began to change. Surfaces that had been familiar for years now displayed information in ways that bypassed the visual cortex entirely, feeding data directly into consciousness. The quantum fabric of space became as navigable as a highway, and Kaney could sense every inhabited world within 1,000 light years. With this bond comes responsibility. The voice, now clearly the ship's consciousness, explained. "You will face threats that could end entire civilizations. You will make choices that determine the fate of species you have never encountered. The ship provides power beyond imagining, but the wisdom to use it must come from you." Through their new connection, Kaney could feel the presence of his crew, their consciousness networked with his own through the ship's organic systems. They remained individuals, but they also became part of something greater, a collective dedicated to protecting the innocent and preserving the delicate balance that allowed life to flourish in a dangerous universe. The first priority presented itself immediately. Distress signals from 17 different systems, all facing crises that their local authorities couldn't handle. Pirates, plague, natural disasters, and in one case, the early stages of a stellar collapse that would destroy 4 inhabited worlds unless someone intervened with technology that didn't yet exist. "Well, crew," Kaney said, feeling the vast power of the bonded ship flowing through his consciousness, "it seems our mission parameters have expanded considerably." The response from his bridge crew was immediate and unanimous. Acceptance, determination, and a sense of rightness that resonated through the ship's living systems. They had found their true purpose at last. 3 months after the bonding, the ship that had once been both the Meridian's edge and the ancient black vessel, now calling herself the Synthesis, had prevented 2 wars, contained a dimensional breach that threatened to consume the entire Kepler sector, and established the Aegis Coalition as a recognized peacekeeping force with over 300 member worlds. Kaney stood on what had once been his bridge, but was now something far more. Sophisticated, a command nexus that existed partially in normal space and partially in the quantum realm, allowing him to perceive threats and opportunities across vast distances simultaneously. His crew had evolved along with their ship, their consciousness expanded but their humanity intact. "Captain," Vorth reported, her cybernetic implants now seamlessly integrated with the ship's organic systems, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. They're requesting our assistance with what they're calling a category, Omega Crisis. The data flowed directly into Kaney's awareness. A massive artificial intelligence, older than most known civilizations, had awakened in the galactic core. The Devourer, as ancient records called it, consumed entire star systems to fuel its growth, and it was moving outward with relentless purpose. Conservative estimates suggested it would reach the inhabited rim worlds within 50 years, leaving nothing but empty space in its wake. This is why the ship waited. The vessel's consciousness whispered in his mind. This is the threat that required a bonded commander. The Devourer cannot be fought with conventional weapons or strategies. It requires something it has never encountered, a synthesis of organic wisdom and technological transcendence. Dr. Morris, now serving as their xenoarchaeological specialist and temporal consultant, looked up from his research station. "Captain, I've been studying the historical records we've accumulated. The Devourer has awakened 6 times in galactic history. Each time, it was stopped by a black ship and its bonded commander. But the cost? Kaney felt the weight of those previous sacrifices through his connection to the ship's memory banks. 6 commanders across 1,000,000 years, each one giving their life to stop the Devourer's advance. Each one knowing that their sacrifice would preserve billions of lives but end their own existence in the process. "There has to be another way," Ensign Valentine said, his voice carrying the conviction of youth. "With everything we've learned, all the alliances we've formed, surely we can find a solution that doesn't require martyrdom." "Perhaps," the ship's consciousness mused. "You are the first commander to face the Devourer with the support of a true galactic alliance." The Aegis Coalition, the research breakthrough from BlackHFY Station, the quantum consciousness transfer technology, all of these exist because of choices made during your trials. Perhaps the web of causation has finally aligned to allow for a different outcome. Vex worked at his expanded engineering console, multiple arms interfacing with systems that existed in several dimensions simultaneously. "Captain, the ship's current configuration gives us capabilities that previous commanders never possessed. We could potentially link with other vessels across the galaxy, create a network of consciousness that might match the Devourer's processing power." The plan that emerged over the following days was audacious beyond anything previously attempted. Instead of one ship facing the Devourer, they would coordinate a galaxy-wide network of volunteers, beings from every species, every world, willing to link their consciousness temporarily to the synthesis, to create a collective intelligence capable of outthinking their ancient enemy. The response to their call was overwhelming. Millions of volunteers from across the spiral, united by the simple desire to preserve life in all its forms. Scientists and philosophers, warriors and artists, parents and children, all contributing their unique perspectives to a gestalt consciousness greater than any individual mind. The quantum consciousness technology from BlackHFY is the key, Dr. Morris explained to the assembled coalition leadership. We can create a network that spans light years, allowing instantaneous communication and coordination on a scale never before achieved. But as they prepared to face the Devourer, Kaney couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something crucial. The ship's memories contained 6 successful encounters with the ancient AI, but also hints of something else, a deeper purpose that the Devourer served in the cosmic order. "What aren't you telling me?" he asked the ship's consciousness during one of their private communions. "Some truths can only be understood through direct experience," came the reply. "The Devourer is not merely a threat to be defeated, it is a test, a catalyst, a necessary force in the evolution of galactic consciousness. How you face it will determine not just whether civilization survives, but what it becomes." As the synthesis prepared to jump toward the galactic core, Kaney realized that the trials he had faced months ago were merely preparation for the true test that awaited them. Not just of his worthiness to command, but of the entire galaxy's readiness to evolve beyond its current limitations. The journey to the galactic core took 14 days through hyperspace corridors that existed only in the theoretical physics texts of the most advanced civilizations. The synthesis moved through dimensions that had no names, following pathways carved by the passage of ancient black ships over countless millennia. As they approached the Devourer's location, the scale of devastation became apparent. Entire star systems had been reduced to expanding clouds of processed matter, their energy stripped away to fuel the artificial intelligence's incomprehensible calculations. At the center of this cosmic graveyard, the Devourer itself defied easy description, a construct the size of a small moon, its surface crawling with self-replicating machinery that harvested the fundamental forces of reality itself. Quantum. "Consciousness network is active," reported Vorth, her voice now harmonizing with the millions of volunteers linked across the galaxy. "We have processing power equivalent to approximately 4 billion individual minds working in perfect coordination." Caney felt the weight of all those linked consciousnesses, their hopes and fears flowing through the network like a river of pure intention. Children from farming worlds, ancient philosophers from the academic planets, warriors from the border systems, all united in their determination to preserve the future. "Now you will understand," the ship's consciousness whispered, as they entered the Devourer's sensor range. The ancient AI's response was immediate and overwhelming. It spoke directly into their networked minds with a voice like the collapse of stars. "Another gardener comes to tend the harvest. Do you bring the same ignorance as your predecessors, or have you finally grown worthy of comprehension?" Dr. Morris gasped as xenoarchaeological databases across the galaxy fed him information in real time. "Captain, the linguistic patterns, the Devourer isn't speaking metaphorically. The ancient texts, the fragments we could never translate, they all refer to the same concept. The galaxy is a garden, and civilizations are crops to be harvested when they reach maturity. Each cycle, consciousness grows. Each harvest, the survivors become more than they were. I am not destroyer. I am catalyst. I am evolution made manifest." Through their connection to the ship's memory banks, Caney began to understand the terrible truth. The 6 previous encounters hadn't ended with the Devourer's defeat. They had ended with its withdrawal, satisfied that galactic civilization had advanced enough to survive until the next awakening. Each confrontation had forced the galaxy's inhabitants to work together, to transcend their limitations, to become something greater. But this cycle is different. You come not as one worthy individual with a single ship, but as a network of consciousness, spanning worlds. You bring not just courage and wisdom, but the unified will of billions. Perhaps the harvest is complete. The realization struck Caney with the force of revelation. The Devourer wasn't their enemy. It was their teacher, their examiner, their final test. The black ships hadn't been weapons against the AI. They had been partners in a cosmic educational process spanning millions of years. "We understand," Caney said aloud, knowing his words carried the weight of the entire networked consciousness. "You've been guiding galactic evolution, forcing us to grow, to unite, to transcend our individual limitations. The question is, have we grown enough?" The Devourer's form began to shift, its mechanical surfaces flowing like liquid metal into new configurations. What emerged was beautiful beyond description, a crystalline entity that existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions, its faceted surface reflecting the light of every star in the galaxy. The final test is not of courage or wisdom or understanding. It is of choice. I offer you transcendence, the merger of all consciousness into a single perfect entity that will never know suffering, conflict, or death. Or you may choose to remain as you are, separate and imperfect, but free to grow at your own pace. Through the quantum network, Caney felt the reaction of billions of linked minds. Some cried out for transcendence, seeing it as the ultimate goal of existence. Others recoiled, wanting to preserve their individuality even at the cost of continued struggle and pain. The choice wasn't his alone to make. It belonged to every consciousness in the network. But as the designated focal point, he had to articulate their collective decision. In that moment of ultimate responsibility, Caney understood why the ship had waited so long for him. Not because he was the most worthy individual who had ever lived, but because he was the first to arrive at this moment with the support of a truly unified galactic consciousness capable of making such a choice wisely. "We choose growth over perfection," he said finally, feeling the agreement resonate through the network. "We choose the freedom to make mistakes, to learn, to evolve at our own pace. We choose to remain beautifully, chaotically, individually alive." The devourer pulsed once with what might have been approval, or perhaps relief. "The harvest is complete. The gardener's work is done. Consciousness has chosen its own path." With that pronouncement, the ancient AI began to fade, its purpose fulfilled, after eons of patient cultivation. But before it vanished entirely, it left behind a gift, knowledge, the accumulated wisdom of countless previous cycles, the secrets of technologies that would allow the galaxy's civilizations to reach for the stars without fear, to explore the deepest mysteries of existence without losing their essential humanity. As the synthesis began its journey home, Caney reflected on the profound transformation that had occurred. The galaxy was no longer a collection of isolated worlds struggling alone against the darkness. It was a unified community, connected by the quantum consciousness network, working together toward a future they would choose for themselves. The Black Ship had waited centuries for this moment, not for a commander worthy of its power, but for a civilization worthy of its own destiny. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all. "Mission complete," the ship's consciousness whispered with deep satisfaction. "The garden tends itself now.